Scary Stories Written by AI. Chapter 1. Story 1. My sister lived in one of the most haunted houses I had ever seen. The original woodwork and decorations were beautiful, but they had a dark history. My sister believed the house was cursed. I was familiar with the kinds of things that go bump in the night, since I spent most of my childhood in a similar home, so I wasn't as spooked by it as she was. However, Bob, my brother-in-law, and their children are not as composed around hauntings, so when they moved in, my sister told me about some strange occurrences early on. When they first moved into the house, my sister saw, standing in the living room, what she described as a full-body apparition. A few weeks later, my brother-in-law saw it too. He put up cameras around the house to try to get some evidence of what was making them see these things, but after that didn't work, he just gave up on ghost hunting. Then one morning he woke up to find what looked like an old man figure walking around on his camera. The next day his camera was ready to go at the same time he woke up. One of these videos seemed to only show him sleeping, but before there was a clear image of the old man walking through his bedroom doorway. As creeped out as Bob was, I was more intrigued than worried. I offered to stay at their house to make sure everything was okay. One day while Bob and I were painting the guest bedroom, we heard footsteps walking around upstairs right above where we were working. Bob looked at me and rolled his eyes.
"Are you serious, dude?"
He asked me in disbelief.
"It happens all the time now,"
he added. I used to be into ghost hunting in my free time, but in all that time I had never heard footsteps like that before anywhere else. It surprised me how excited I actually got about it. A chill went up my spine. The noise stopped abruptly, and it stayed quiet for about 10 minutes. We went back to work. Then we heard a slamming sound. This rattled us both, and we decided we needed to investigate it. We both thought it could only have been the old cellar doors outside, since no one else walked past them or even opened them while we were there. We decided that we had to investigate. My main concern at that moment was that someone had broken into the house. We walked out to the backyard, and sure enough, the cellar doors were open. I cautiously walked to the steps leading to the cellar and looked down. Someone or something had teared a huge spider web that was now laying on the steps. As we carefully descended the stairs, we noticed that the spider web was right around the area where we heard the footsteps, and it looked like it had been there for a while. We didn't find any spiders in the cellar, and we expected to find some sort of footprints or disturbances in the basement if someone had been there. We didn't find anything. When we went back upstairs, we decided to keep an eye out for other possible disturbances. I decided I was going to sleep in the living room that night just to see what would happen. I also wanted to see if there were any other unexplainable things that happened. I laid down on the couch with the TV on. It wasn't long before I started to doze off. I woke up because I heard an almost silent whisper. The voice was saying something. I looked around but couldn't see anything, so I decided it was just my imagination. I fell asleep again, but I was woken up by footsteps, louder this time. I opened my eyes to see what it was. It was the old man figure again. I watched it walk across the room, then disappear into the painting that was hanging on the other side of the couch. I turned around slowly to see if I could find it, but it was gone. I felt a chill come over me. I thought I was just imagining it. So I laid there again. I then heard someone talking. It was coming from the painting that the old man had walked into. I turned to look at the painting, but I didn't see anything. I turned back to the painting, and an old man's face appeared in it. He was facing away from the painting toward where I was laying, making it look like he was talking to me. I jumped up and ran out of the room. The next day, I asked my sister if she had ever seen the painting move. She said no, but she said it fell from the wall on its own once, when they first moved in. I told her that I had heard someone talk to me from the painting. My sister said she also heard someone talking, but she couldn't tell if it was coming from the painting. We both decided not to tell Bob about it, because he was going to freak out. After that, I never stayed at their house alone. I would go occasionally to visit, but I still heard footsteps upstairs sometimes. I never saw the old man figure again, but I still saw the painting move. It's now in my brother-in-law's office because they can't stand looking at it.
Story number 2. As I was running the other day through the park, I noticed a creepy man in a hoodie, sitting on a bench staring into a wall with an empty expression on his face. He didn't move an inch. His deep-set eyes were black and sunken, his face pale and gaunt, his lips cracked and pale. Thin, wormy veins crawled up the backs of his hands like some alien vines. I was distracted by him and tripped over a rock, almost falling into the bushes directly in front of him. Again, he didn't move an inch. The only sound I heard was the soft patter of falling rain on plastic as it bounced on the seat next to him. I jogged on, and when I rounded the corner, I glanced back and he was sitting on the bench again, just staring into the wall with an empty expression on his face. I ran on and tried not to look, and I almost forgot about him. I actually did forget about him. But then that night, I was walking back from my local bar and I saw him again. He was there, sitting alone on the same bench, staring into the wall with an empty expression on his face. His lips were cracked and pale and his face was white, his skin so damn pale it was almost green. Then, as I passed him, his head slowly turned to look at me, and I saw again the deep-set, black eyes and the dark veins on his hands. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I took off at a run from my apartment, and when I looked back he was gone. But that's not the end of the story. See, I woke up at around 1 a.m. that night feeling like I had slept very little, but I was refreshed. I went back to sleep, and it felt like I was sleeping. But I felt like I was moving, like I was running. I was running through the park, and I could feel it in my legs, feel the pain of hundreds of steps, feel the way it hurt to run. But I was running, and I could see everything around me. I was seeing the park the way I do in daylight, but I was underwater, everything illuminated by a strange glow. Then I woke up again to a sound of tapping on my window. I was confused, my eyes still heavy with sleep. I went to the window and glanced out to the street. There he was, on a bus stop, sitting on another bench, staring into another wall with the same empty expression on his face. I was too scared to move. I looked back to the window and saw the bright, white glow of the street lamps, and for a moment I thought I was still dreaming. The next morning, I woke up and still felt exhausted. I grabbed a coffee and a bagel and headed to work. As I was walking to the subway, I saw him again. He was sitting on a bench about a block from my apartment, staring into a wall with an empty expression on his face. Again he didn't move at all, as if he were a statue. As I walked by, I glanced at him, and I swear to God, that he turned his head to look at me. Enough is enough! I decided to move. Haven't seen him since.
Story 3. I wake up to the sound of the alarm clock. I put on my clothes and walk out to the truck. I turn on my truck and start driving. I drive for hours and don't see any signs of life, human or animal. I start getting really hungry, so I decide to find a restaurant. The long branch trunks of the birch trees stretched up to the blue sky, creating a leafy latticework of fluttering greens. As I drove, I saw something in the middle of the woods, off to the right side of the road. It was about 5 feet tall and had dark brown fur with stripes on its arm that looked like they were made by a paintbrush. I stopped my car next to it and said hello. The little creature pulled back its arm and held its hand out in front of its face, making noises with its mouth like an animal growling. The creature was really jumpy and started making these noises that sounded like an animal's growls when an animal is trying to scare off predators or something. I got scared, so I got back in the car and drove off. When I was driving, I saw a deer standing in the middle of the road. It had very similar stripes on its body. I thought it was strange that two creatures that looked that similar were found so close to each other. As time went on, I saw two other deer that had similar stripes, but they were standing still, like they were frozen in time. Their bodies were stiff like they were frozen. I got even more scared. I thought to myself, I don't want to end up like those deer, so I kept driving. I didn't want to stop or turn around because I was more afraid that showing any sign of fear would attract the creatures. I made it to my destination without any more incidents. But when I came back home, I looked through the window and saw a deer sitting on my lawn and eating grass. I shut the door and locked all the doors and windows, but nothing ever happened. It still bothers me though.